things that you have told us from many different angles. Again, I just appreciate the teaching that we've been able to sit under and the just wisdom that you've given them. I just pray that today the words I speak would be one that influence or is in line with what you have said, and that they're not influenced by things that are outside of your character. So, Lord, we give you thanks for the season and the moments of joy. Amen. Okay. Are we good to go, boss?
Yep.
All right. So, Tim asked me to fill in, and his request was do something that you've been doing, which is nothing. So we're done, guys. That's joking. Okay. But for the last 2 years, I've been going through Christian counseling, getting the master's in that. And actually, last Saturday, I finished. I'm done. Yay. We'll see if I pass, though. I submitted everything. We'll see what happens. And so in regards to that, that means that I will be talking about counseling a wee bit, okay? And it's not like, hey, let's do a word study on the word counsel. Because honestly, you're not going to find that word too often directly in the Bible. You're going to find other things that relate to it. And so we're going to get to that, okay? And this is not, how do I say, the stereotype of we're going to sit down and we're going to hypnotize you and do other things. That's not where we're going with this, okay? What we're going to do is actually, we're going to take up a case study. And that case study is one that's going to be found in the Bible. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to see someone's conversation and we're going to evaluate it. And as we evaluate it, the purpose of evaluating is to be able to say, what did this person do right? What did this person do wrong? Because that's the neat thing about the Bible is it doesn't always like kick out the things that are ugly, right? It accurately records the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we get to see accurate lies because they're in there. And we have to discern that, well, it's a lie. But if it was said, the Bible still records it. So with that, I have to apologize and say, guys, I know that this is the Christmas message, right? It's not Christmas at all. It's, in fact, if you want to label it, we will label it as Debbie Downer. Okay. So if you guys have a moment, go ahead and turn to the book of Job. Okay. And as soon as you get there, I'll have you flip to some other places. But that's kind of where we're going to be camping. Okay. Now, Job is that case study book. And if you guys are familiar with it, you kind of know why it's kind of labeled Debbie Downer, right? So before we get into that, one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about. Oh, hey, Ben.
Hey, Josh.
I get to do that because I'm up here, and normally I'm walking in when you do.
With banana.
Yes, with a banana. Looks good. Okay. So last Wednesday, Tim was teaching. One of the verses that he pulled out has really actually stuck with me a lot, even though I've been trying to get my paper done. And by the way, you tell me if I ever get way off, just shoo me like this because I wander.
Okay. You're good. You're good.
And so one of the verses was John 13, verse 35. Can anyone just say what that is off the top of their head?
That's the love one.
100 points for Holland. Yes, that's the love one. Because you see, Jesus is sitting there, right? And Tim was talking about, he's sitting with his disciples. He's getting them ready. And he's saying, listen, guys, you're going to go out, right? The world's not going to be so nice. But what I want you to know is that the world's going to know you're one of my followers. How? Say that again.
By your love.
By your love
For one another.
for one another. Not your love for bananas. And,
Or horns.
or horns. So what is the point of that? Okay. Often we try to figure out okay, who's a Christian? Who's not a Christian? How do I look like a Christian? Oh, hey, like Tim says, if I wear this Christian shirt with a nice little cross on it, or I have a bumper sticker my kid's a better Christian than your kid, people know, right? But that's not what Jesus says is the way in which we're identified by the world. Because the world is they. The world is saying those people are different. And they're identified by their love for one another. Okay, and that's John 13:35. The reason we bring that up is the biggest question that I have. How do you love your brother when they are in a time of trial, a time of affliction, a time of hardship, a time of misery, or whatever? How do you love them? Because it's by your love for them that the world will know you're a follower of Christ. And I think sometimes when we think about the world's going to know us, right, by our love for each other, we think of, well, hey, I provided some coats, or there's this poor missionary who can't get their act together, and so I give them money every month. Those are great acts of love, right? And they really are. But what about that one act of, I see this person over here, and they're not talking today, and I don't know why. And we can see that, right? I mean, we really can. And how do you approach that? So that's why we're looking at Job, okay? And before we jump into Job, here's your key verse that I want you to hold on to. Because again, we're kind of giving some practical pointers on what to do. Tim talked about this, I think about a month ago. 1 Thessalonians 5:14, okay? And Faye, could you by chance give me some water? Thanks. And all right, 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says this. And, big water. And we urge you, brothers, okay? Admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, and be patient with them all, okay? The reason I bring that up is I can't tell you how many times that verse was brought about in the counseling classes. Because it's kind of one that a lot of counseling systems actually pulled a name from. Nouthetic is the word admonish. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Nutheo, something like that. Okay, you guys know. There's another one in there where the system is based off of a parakaleo, and it's not the exact Greek word, I'm guessing.
You're right.
Am I right? Parakaleo?
Well, it's just that it's a we rather than a I.
Okay. Inclusive, not exclusive. There we go. All right. So anyhow, using this verse, this is kind of your cipher verse, your key verse to go off of, because when you approach someone, you need to determine something. One, are they idle? Are they faint-hearted? Are they weak? Because there's a different approach for each of those scenarios. Because oftentimes we kind of come at people's emotional needs in the same way that we approach carpentry. A hammer works for everything, right? Don't ask me to build, okay? But I've seen my stepdad. He has a pair of pliers he carries with him the whole time. And he uses that as a screwdriver. I don't know how. He uses that as a hammer, as a crowbar, everything. Like he'll fix a tractor and plane a piece of wood with this pair of pliers. I don't know how he does it, okay? But sometimes we approach helping people in the same way. Now, all of these have a time to be used. There's a time to admonish, there's a time to encourage, and there's a time to help. The one that doesn't have a specific time is patience, which I love. Because if you're going to help with people, what he says is no matter the scenario, if they're idle, if they're faint-hearted, if they're weak, you have to be patient. So, as we begin to look at Job and what happens with his life, what I want you to do is to evaluate and say, okay, this is the scenario, this is what's going on. Where is he at? And what does that mean I need to do? Okay, so turn to Job. And if you're driving a manual, as in, you got a paper Bible, it's in the Old Testament. Okay, if you have, an automatic, you just type in Job and it'll pull it up. There we go. Give you a moment. All right. So we are going to cover chapters 1 through 42 today. Actually, it was funny because when I was preparing, I was like, oh, we can do this. If I just pull out a couple key verses here and there, we can cover the entire conversation. Oh my word. I'm glad I'm not trying to force that. Maybe we'll have another time, because each one of these conversations, they actually reveal a different aspect and a different point in which we can learn from. You see, the setting of Job, in case you're not familiar. Actually, let me back up. Disclaimer. Many of you here know that there's a distinction between the day and age that we're in and Job. And I just want to make that distinction clear, because if you go about Job as a point of, hey, we're going to learn something, and you apply everything that you read, you're going to have problems. Because, in fact, there's going to be this time where you see, oh, the right thing to do was to sit with a guy for 7 days and 7 nights. And so our funerals need to change for 7 days and 7 nights. That's not for us, okay? There are things that you're going to see that are overall principles in which we can glean. And if this is something that you're hearing maybe for the first time, like, what do you mean there's a distinction? It's often referred to as dispensation, okay? Big word, $6 word, you can look famous, okay? But what it simply is meaning is that at the day of Pentecost, things changed. The day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit started baptizing believers into Christ. And everything from that point on that we read is directly applicable, directly stated for you and I today. Everything that was prior is still important, because we learn so much about God, his character, his faithfulness, his truth. And the only thing really that understanding dispensations is going to do for you is help you categorize and see the big picture. Because honestly, there's things that seem contradictory. Like, hey, we can eat meat if you're Adam and Eve, but now we can't eat pork if you're Israelite, but I'm sure someone's going to have bacon downstairs. Like, what's going on? Where are we at? And those distinctions, if you're confused about them, I'd encourage you, do a study on dispensations, okay? I'm done with that now. There's my disclaimer. We're going into Job. Not everything is directly applicable. And remember, the Bible accurately records lies as well. Not that God lies, but if a person says something, you have to ask yourself, is that actually true? So let's set the scene. Job, and I'm just going to kind of briefly cover chapters 1 and 2. Okay. I'm gonna read verse 8, because this is kind of the one that's going to give the setting. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? Okay, so you might be wondering, hold on a second. Okay, what's going on? God is talking to Satan. We're not going to get onto that one. That's another topic that you asked him about. Okay, there we go. No, don't shake your head, Tim. You got this. Okay. But our topic today is we're looking at how do you come and comfort and love and help and admonish a brother who's in need, right? Because we want to be able to walk out in love for each other. So we're not going to get pulled away from those. But it is an interesting question. And so what's happening is Satan's up there and he's talking to God, and God says, have you seen this man, Job? First of all, kudos to Job for living a life that God brings on you. That's pretty cool. And what essentially happens is God says, I've got this guy. His name's Job. He's awesome. And if you read on your own, what you're going to see is Satan's response is, well, I get that. There's this guy, Job, right? And he's a really good guy. But he only follows you because you made his life easy. He's a good weather follower. And God's response essentially to that is like, no, he's not. He's a guy who's after my heart. And again, I'm paraphrasing a lot. But God is saying, this Job guy, he's got it together. And Satan's saying, no, he doesn't. And Satan says, you know what? I'll prove it to you. You allow me, and I'll go down, and we'll strip him away of his things, and he's going to reject you. Again, another big topic if you're wondering. Okay, something's about to happen. And we get this big picture of what's going on between God and Satan, right? But I'm going to try not to get distracted. We go back down. I'm just setting the scene. And then what happens in the rest of chapter 1 and in parts of chapter 2, Satan goes down and destroys all of Job's wealth. His employees dead. His livestock gone. This man is now penniless. And as he's getting the report, like, Job, you've lost everything. And in comes another guy and be like, hey, Job, I see you're busy, but I got something important to tell you. Your entire family's dead. Like, let's not gloss over that, right? Because here's an important thing. When you go to help someone, one of the first steps that you have to do is understand what they're feeling, not just what they've been through. And to do that, you really got to place yourself in their shoes, right? And I really want you to do that as we continue in the rest of what's going to happen. Because if you gloss over the fact that this man's wealth, prosperity, financial security, and family is gone, the rest of it's just going to be words to you. But really kind of get into that. And to help, if you have family, look at your family. And if your family's not here, think about your family. And then in the next moments, think about the fact that they're gone forever, like that. And now it's just you. And you have no job, you have no money, you're homeless. Really, that's you right now. What are you feeling? Like, are you excited for life? And you know what's really neat is in the end of that, God says, and Job did not sin. Job wept and wailed and grieved, but he did not sin. God was right. Satan wasn't done yet. He's like, hold on a second. Let's amp it up, because of course he's still going to be with you. He's got his hell. And probably one of the most miserable things that I could think of is that Job is covered from head to toe in boils. Like, to understand that, let me say this. You can give me 3 forms of malaria, beat me with a baseball bat, and I would still rather that than to be covered from head to toe in boils. Like, if you have 1 boil, don't approach that person who has 1 boil, because they are not going to respond well. Now, if you're covered from head to toe, you literally can't lay down, because laying down hurts. You can't sit down. Sitting down hurts. So you want to grieve over all of your losses, but now you're covered from head to toe. Are you feeling what this guy's feeling? Are you ready to be approached to receive encouragement and admonishment, right? Because that's where Job is. And so now we get into Job chapter 2, verse 11. Because in walks the next character. And these are the important characters. These are the guys that we're going to get the case study, because Job is the afflicted. And these guys are going to be the helpers. And what we want to do is be able to evaluate, did these guys do a good job? If not, everyone's already shaking their head. Did you guys read ahead? That's cheating. Okay? But why? What went wrong? What could they do different? So Job chapter 2. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil, okay, that had come upon him, and this is verse 11, chapter 2, verse 11. They came each from his own place, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. And from now on, I will be referring to them as friend 1, friend 2, and friend 3. Okay, thank you. And then they made an appointment to come together to show him sympathy and comfort. Does your guys' Bible say anything else in regards to what do they come to show him? Mine has sympathy and comfort.
Yeah.
What was that back there?
More with him.
Mourn with them. Okay. By the way, I am like hearing impaired like everyone else in this church. So feel free to speak up. I'm in good company, okay? So this is important, okay? Because what is their motive? What is their reason for coming? To show sympathy, to mourn with them, to comfort with them. This is important, okay? And we have this insight that why did this happen to Job? Did Job sin? Did Job deserve this? Was God saying Job needs to learn something? No. This was completely outside of Job, but it still happened to him. And so his friends are coming down. They saw all this evil that's happening. I want friends like that, right? Who see me in misery, who have heard of me in misery and say, let's come together. Let's go be with the guy. And so now verse 12, and when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. Now, when I said I'd rather have malaria, I was not joking. You cover someone head to toe in boils, their body is going to start deteriorating. Okay? His friends could not recognize him. And they, when they saw him, they raised their voices and wept. And they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads towards heaven. Verse 13, and they sat with him on the ground 7 days, 7 nights. And no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. Okay, that's the scene. And by the way, when I read across this, it just made P&G like come back to me right there. Because what happens is like, we read some of these saying, oh, that's a neat picture. Like this is literally how I feel it happens in P&G. In fact, there was this guy, really neat friend of mine, Ben, he lived right next to Joe Kita's house. This guy was yoked. Like, we have Ben, but this guy would put Ben to shame. Okay? Just ripped. And he was like the man's man, Chuck Norris, all the time. And there was a day he went down to another village and he came back up and he was a little sick. A month later, he couldn't get out of bed and he had this growth right here on his neck. A month later, he went from looking like Mr. Universe to a Holocaust survivor. Like, I'm not joking, I'm not exaggerating. His bones were the most defiant part of his body. And you know what happened? Is people from around other villages, family and friends, would start coming to him. And it's the craziest thing. And you can imagine, there's this path, and you can see down this path 150 yards. And I'm sitting there with the family as this man's laying on the ground. He's got a blanket on him, but they don't have furniture like we do. And he's laying there. And his immediate family, his kids, are just sitting there in silence. But what happens is you see this group of people walking, and they're talking, and they're probably saying, hey, did you hear Bob caught a mackerel? Wow, that's really cool. And they're walking, and they see a line, and it's like, boom, right here. And they're like, wait. And they wait kind of for everyone to come. Everyone's there. And I tried to ask Faye if she would do this, but they turn around, and as a group, they begin wailing. And it is the first time I saw that, I'm kind of blown away. Because it's not like a little whimper. If I was brave, it would be at the top of my lungs.
You can
And-
hear it across the village, like you hear it everywhere. It's so loud.
But they can go from this moment of just being fine to this point of double barrel snot just coming down, wailing to an extreme. And they come, and as they approach and they get closer, anything that is not stable, they crush, they break. They're grabbing things and they're smashing it. They come to the base of where this guy is laying, and they just fall on the ground. And they're wailing and going crazy. And usually they have about a half an hour time slot in which they get to wail. And then they have to move to the side for the next group to approach and begin their wailing. But it's their way in which they show grief. And what happens is literally for the next X amount of days, they won't leave that spot. So when it says his friends came to him and saw him on the ground, and for 7 days and 7 nights they sat with him on the ground, that is legit. And that is so incredibly tough to do. I have only been able to make it a day and a half because it is day and night. You don't leave. And his friends sat there for 7 days and 7 nights. And what blows me away is they saw his suffering, right? And what did they do? Nothing. They didn't say a word to him. Because in reality, this is one of the first things that you have to do. You have to understand where they're at. Okay, again, I said step one, try to relate to them, okay? We tried to relate because we read Job's story. Now his friends are relating. How do they do that? Step one, how do they relate to them? They come, they tear their clothes, they wail, they're feeling the anguish that he's feeling, and they sit on the ground with him so that they can understand him. Do you think that comforted Job? It's interesting because we think about wailing and instantly wailing. It's like, no, please don't scream right next to me. That doesn't comfort me. But in their culture, yeah, it does. And to have that person come alongside you and to sit down and not to, moment one, say, let me tell you how to fix this. That's encouraging.
I have a question. So were they wailing, was it because they were so sorrowful for him, or because they, I mean, it's not necessarily comforting to him to have them wail, right?
Well,
This is
we don't have,
society.
there's a cultural aspect to it because we don't have a whole lot on the culture that's happening because Job is actually prior to everything else that we have. I mean, chronologically, that's when it falls in play. But for like the people on Bali, that wailing is actually comfort. There's a lot of things that go on with it. But if a person was to walk up in this culture and do nothing and to show no emotion, that person who they're coming to is now in question. Why? Do you not care for me? Because if you cared for me, you would do this. And in the backside of their mind, did you do this to me? Because if you're not willing, if you're not mourning, then you probably did this to me. Because there's a bit of that magic that goes on with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first saw that, I literally wrote in my notes, fake. Because that's what it felt like to me. Because I watched them talk about fishing. And then there's this line, fishing, fishing, fishing. Wow! I mean, I won't go as loud. Faye's really good at it.
I did last time, like, we please do that.
And it was like Tim the other day when he got all of us. And he's sitting there and he begins sobbing. Do you remember that?
That song,
Yeah.
You were crying because your comic books are gone.
Oh.
You seriously got all of us. That was really good. Okay.
And lesbians.
But
That was real.
Yeah.
that was
Someone died.
I saw that.
Something serious happened.
so. All right. So what happens after this point? Okay,
Hey, really quick before,
go for it.
what happened to that guy? Just out of curiosity. Survive or did he?
No, he died, and
Pretty much from starvation. This thing got so big he couldn't eat anymore.
That's right.
yeah, and we tried to get him off the island, but they didn't want to. And there's other connotations that happen with it. But yeah, when we read in the Old Testament that wailing and that ripping of clothes, it still happens today.
Yeah.
And it's different to be not wrong, different.
Yeah, if somebody did that in our culture, if anybody ever been to a funeral and there's somebody that really is sobbing uncontrollably at a funeral, and you have other people that are like, I can't believe they're doing that. Like right now, it's like, control yourself. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I've seen people respond that way to somebody sobbing uncontrollably.
Yeah, we're a very stoic, hitting group of people. Emotions bad, strength good, right? All right, so here we go. Let's move in. So after 7 days of sitting there, right? These friends, they sat there, and again, my encouragement to you is when you see someone who's lost everything, and your goal to come to be sympathetic and to comfort them, go there and sit with them. Sometimes it's awkward because you feel like you need to say something, but just go and sit with them. If you can put an arm around them, put an arm around them. And just sit for a while, an hour, 2 hours, 7 days. Okay, if you have the time, different culture. It's helpful. Okay, now the next thing that we jump into is Job breaks silence, right? So moving to chapter 3. I'm going to just kind of give you a couple key things, okay? Because this is moving into the second thing that we're into. First step is learn what's going on with them and how they feel. Second step, listen, okay? When they decide to speak, listen. This is very important. You see, all of chapter 3, essentially Job says one thing over and over and over in different ways. He says, I wish I was never born. The day that my mom carried me, I wish that day didn't exist. In fact, those people who go about cursing days, I wish they would curse that day. Why was I born to just have the light taken away from me, to walk in misery? That's essentially what Job's saying. Verse 11, why did I not die at birth? Verse 16, why was not hidden? Verse 20, why is light given to him who's in misery and life to the bitter soul? Verse 26, I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. All right, now enters that first friend whose purpose for coming was to comfort and to be sympathetic. Okay. Actually, before we see what the friend says, based off of what Job says, going back to 1 Thessalonians 5:14, is he idle? Is he faint-hearted? Or is he weak? Or is it a combination? Anyone?
Definitely weak.
No. I hear faint-hearted, I heard weak.
I think it's a combination.
Yeah.
It's a combination. Okay, so what makes you think faint-hearted?
Exhausted from just the pain.
Yeah,
He's not sleeping.
he's not sleeping. No.
So it's hard to be strong with heart.
Yeah. So why would you say weak?
Yeah, I just think he's exasperated, exhausted, feeling in the dumps.
Definitely. So would you say he's idle?
They're not able to do much.
Not really.
Come on, he sat and did nothing for 7 days. Get up, get off the couch, put on your boots, go to work, right? Okay.
Put on your boots with boils.
Yeah, just get a nice soft cardigan. Like that's gonna feel good, right? This is important because we don't want to misapply what we do. Is admonishing good? Yes, in the right time. You definitely need to do it. Is encouraging good? Yes, in the right time. Can you use encouragement in the wrong time? Yeah, you can. Can you do help in the wrong time? Yeah, you can. So discerning what Job is saying, I would honestly, yes, he's going to be physically weak. No, I'm not going to say he's idle. The man has valid reasons, but he is faint-hearted. Every word that he says is a word of despair. Okay, again, I ask you to put yourself in his shoes. Can you honestly say that you be sitting there going, peaches and rainbows, love my life? Maybe you can. I wouldn't. I really would. And if you think, well, hey, you know what? He's probably still got something, right? Yeah, his wife didn't die, which was great, right? Because if I have my spouse, I can still go through anything, except for Job's wife. She walks up to him and says, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? What does he have? Can we relate to what he says? Do we feel the need that we need to tell him, like, Job, no, listen, Job, God He's got this under control, okay? What do you do to a person like Job? How do you encourage them? That's the question I really want you to think about. So his friend, let's see what his friend does, right? Okay, friend number 1, Eliphaz. Verses 2 through, let's go through about 4 or 5.
What chapter we at?
Chapter 4, thank you, Josh. Chapter 4, verse 2. Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, if one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? Who can keep you from speaking? Behold, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have upheld him who was stumbling, and you have made firm the feeble knees. Okay, what was the friend's goal? To comfort. Is he encouraging Job? Yeah, he is actually. He comes up and he hears Job say all these things, and he's like, Job, 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 I want to remind you, remember who you are, right? Does he encourage him like, hey, remember who you are in Christ? No, because he can't. Remember, different dispensations, okay? So we have to kind of do our little bit of bridges there. But does he encourage him? He does. And he tells him, listen, you're that guy. You're the guy who everyone comes to. And that's encouraging praise right there for friend 1. Friend 1, you sat with him for 7 days and 7 nights. And when it comes to the faint-hearted, we are to encourage. And friend 1 encourages. But friend 1 does not shut up.
Yeah.
And that begins the problem. You see, after he told him all these things, verse 5, he says, but now it has come to you and you're impatient. Okay, again, I want you to feel like Job. Okay, I want you to feel like everything is lost. And I'm going to come to you and say, hey, you know what? You did all these great things, but you need to suck it out. Okay, you're being impatient with God. Because God, you got to let this play out. I know you lost your family. I know all your kids and your grandkids that you love, and all your employees who you care for, and your health, but stop being impatient. Just wait on the Lord. Is that encouraging? No, what is that? It's admonishing. Is it incorrect? No, it's actually not. Should we be patient? Yeah, we should be. But it's misapplying how to help someone in need. He came across and said, I'm going to admonish you. It continues on. He's like, listen, not only that, but all those things that you help the other people with, you help them. And now that it's touched you, where's your hope? Where's your integrity? Where's your faith? Where's your fear of the Lord? That's what he talks about in verses 6 through 7. And you can go on through the rest of chapter 4 and on through chapter 5. Great friend, long-winded. And essentially he says the same thing over and over and over and over. You need to just sit there. And you need to be patient with God. You need to wait on the Lord. And you need to be encouraged. So, did his friend respond in an appropriate way? What do you guys think? It's in the Bible, so it must be appropriate.
I think he kind of stepped on him while he was down. The argument is, you've done a lot of good, but we know that God doesn't punish the good, he only punishes the unrighteous. And you're getting punished, so you must have something you did.
There we go. Okay, so for those of you who didn't hear, what Josh was saying is the argument is essentially God doesn't punish the innocent. He doesn't go about beating those who don't deserve it. Is that true? Does God punish innocent? No, he doesn't. Who's innocent? No. So, therefore, there is no innocent that God punishes. But in the same sense, we can rely on God, right? But then he takes that argument and said, since God doesn't punish the innocent, and I'm innocent and I'm not suffering, but you're suffering, we conclude P then Q then P. Okay, this is a logic joke, sorry.
Kenya's not here.
Oh, Kenya's not here. We conclude that you're a sinner. Okay, Again, can you relate? Your life is miserable. You can't sit down. You can't lay down. Your family's dead. Your prosperity's gone. You have nothing to your name. And your wife has said, why don't you just hurry up and die? And then your friend comes to you. And your friend says, you know what? The reason you're here is because you messed up. It's your fault. Let me encourage you with this. If a person is suffering, even if it is their fault, don't come to them right away and say, this is your fault. And you should just accept it. Because they're faint-hearted. You admonish the idle, you encourage the faint-hearted. There will come a time for it. But if you don't, quite honestly, you make things worse. If you don't believe me, let's see how Job responds. So chapter 6, Job's reply says this. Yeah, okay. Verse 8, oh, that I may have my request, and that God would fulfill my hope. By the way, is Job a person who keeps thinking about God? He is. Definitely he is. Today we'd say he's a Christian, right? His hope is in God. And so Job, after his friend just says, stop being impatient, just seek the Lord, is what he says. Job says, well, that I might have my request and that God will fulfill my hope. That it would please God to crush me. That he would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my comfort. I would even exult in pain unsparing. For I have not denied the words of the Holy One. Did friend one help? Did Job respond with thankfulness and encouragement? No, he didn't, guys. I mean, again, I'm taking one section. Read that whole chapter. Because it essentially is summarizing that Job says, you did not listen to me. Because Job's whole chapter says what? I wish I was never born. Friend one says, well, hey, you know what? I know that that's what you're thinking. But hey, I want to tell you that you just need to be patient and seek the Lord. What is friend one implying when he says that? That he's not. I mean, he really is implying you're not. Okay? And Job is already crushed. And like Josh says, he's being stepped on. What would have been a good thing to say to Job? Anyone? Maybe you really relate with Job. You're in that spot. What would encourage you?
God has changed. Stop talking about the situation. Start talking about God.
Okay. What were you saying, Ben?
Hopefully this is just a short time.
This is just a short time.
Maybe have him read the book of Job.
Be like, where's your spouse? I just want to know where they're at. To be quite honest, the response has to be changed way back after Job began talking. Okay. When Job starts saying that, gosh, you know, my comfort would just be to die. That is your first indicator that teaching and admonishing is not the route to go. This is very important, okay? The second thing that Job says to him, getting down to verse 20. Oh, wait, that was the wrong section. It is 24, verse 24. There we go. Job says, after he's essentially just saying, my comfort, my hope is that God would just crush me. Okay. He then says, teach me, and I will be silent. Is Job a person who doesn't want to learn? No, he wants to learn. He really does. He wants to change the scenario. If you've ever been in a cruddy scenario, you're not sitting there going, yeah, I just hope I can stay here. I'm just going to stay in what I've been doing so I can just stay here. No, you want to be taught. And he says, make me understand how I've gone astray. Verse 25, how forceful are upright words? But what does reproof from you, reprove? Essentially, what is your correction correct? You're telling me to change. What is your correction doing? Do you think that you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is one? Okay. What do we say about Job? Looking back at 1 Thessalonians 5:14. Is he idle? Is he faint-hearted? Is he weak? He's definitely faint-hearted. And what's happening now is they're forgetting the last one, number 4, right? Be patient with them all. When a person is suffering, they're going to lash out at you. You're going to come and you're going to say, I'm here to help. And they're going to scream. Maybe not literally, but they're going to scream inside. They're going to lash out at you. Not because they don't like you, but it hurts. Like if you've ever just nailed your thumb, right? With a hammer or whatever, and someone comes up and they just want to hug you, you might be throwing elbows because it's not that I don't love you. I just can't respond well. You need to be encouraged with the fact that when you go to encourage someone who's suffering and they lash out, it's not because you did wrong. It's not because they hate you. Their life is painful. And at that moment, you need to hug the porcupine. Because the porcupine needs to be hugged. It really does. Because at this point, Job he's crying out. Remember, when you're admonishing, when you're encouraging, when you're helping, if they don't respond well, that's okay. You're told to be patient with them all. So our act of love is to identify what do they need, to start helping, and then to be patient with them. Really be patient. And my question really is, how long do you be patient? 1 hour? A day? A week? What's that? Ben, thank you. Because that's it. It's what's needed. You cannot put a time frame on it. It's what's needed. And this is important, right? Because Job has no one now. He has only a community that has chosen to come to him. And sometimes that's us guys. Sometimes we have no one around except for that community that comes to us. Would you be willing to commit your patience to as long as it's needed? Because it is needed. You see, this is just conversation 1 of many. And honestly, I thought, hey, let's get through the whole thing. But each conversation is going to pull something out. Because one of the things that could have really helped Job's friend is to listen and not just hear. Okay, here's a practical thing that I really want to kind of like have people be able to grab onto. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Because you can be hearing impaired and still listen. I know that because I'm hearing impaired, okay? But you can also hear and not listen whatsoever. So essentially, listening is, I understood what you're trying to communicate. So if Job's friends listened, they would have understood what Job is trying to communicate. That Job is in misery and I need to help him. But they heard. They assumed. And before Job was finished, they probably had an answer. That's hearing. If you're sitting there and you're wondering, like, I'm not sure if I'm a good listener or a good, or a bad listener. If you're anything like me, it's just by default you're a bad listener. Okay? My wife will attest to it. How do you discern if you're a good listener or a bad listener? Here's one of the easiest ways. Do you have an answer before they're done? If a person is talking to you,
No.
you better. If a person is talking to you and they're just vomiting their heart and you're like, would you just shut up? Because I've got an answer.
You said the last 5 minutes, I was thinking of my answer.
I'm out. So what do you do? If you start recognizing, okay, I've actually stopped thinking about what this person is saying because I'm preparing my argument. I'm preparing my answer. Step one is stop. Okay. How do you become a better listener? There's lots of ways, but here's a simple one. If a person's talking to you, and as a person who's talking, try not to go on forever and ever and ever, because this will help people who are listening to you. When they get done talking, you say, hey, I want to take a moment and clarify. I'm going to tell you what I heard as the main points. Would you tell me that is that correct or is that wrong? And then what happens is that person will then say, actually, points 1 and 2, yes, but you were off on that one. The next step is repeat. You let them re-clarify. When they get done, then you say, okay, this is what I heard. It's seriously that simple. It really is. And you never answer, you never object, you never go at them until clarification's done. And you might have to recycle that clarification 3 or 4 times, depending on your listening abilities. You'll get better at it. And it will also help them get better at communicating to you. Because a lot of times, I'm just going to say maybe between husband and wives, miscommunication happens. Okay.
Talking about.
But it happens. And so not just in how do you relate to someone who's suffering, but how do you communicate to your spouse, to your kids, or to whatever problem comes. Listen. Then say, hey, this is what I heard. Is that correct? If you get past that, congratulations, move on to step 2 and begin applying, admonishing, encouraging, or helping. Okay? But if you can't get past the listening, don't even attempt. Because what happens is they're saying, my issue's here. And you're like, yes, I have the correct answer. Because Job's friends were correct. They didn't say anything incorrect. God is good. We should seek God. But Job's over here. That answer's over here. If they listen, they would be over here too. So all that to say, in our first case study, what has happened with this scenario is what we had guys who came down to say, Job, we want to be with you, we want to comfort you, and they did well. And then Job spoke and said, my life is miserable. And they said, yeah, it should be because you probably sinned. Okay? You probably did something wrong. And maybe many of you are sitting like, gosh, I'm so glad I don't have Job's friend. Like, his friends, like, come on. But let's be honest, sometimes we have probably been that. And that's the challenging thing, right? Is Job's friends didn't wait for Job to say, hey, come on over, my life's miserable, I need you to encourage me. Job's friends identified that from afar. They came, and they said, we want to be with you. And then from there, Job's friends began relating with him. If there's someone that you know is suffering, it's not that you're a busybody, and it's not that you're going to come in and correct them. You're going to come to sympathize and comfort them. Sit with them. You really can do that, okay? And I want to bring about one more major point, and this is one that's really not a joking matter, okay? Because if Job responds in the way that he did, if I'm speaking to a friend and saying, you know what, I get it. Your life was miserable, is miserable. It sucks. And I can't explain why it happened because we know that what? Job was righteous. And that it's not God trying to teach Job something. It's outside of that. And so we can't really go up and say, Job, you just need to pray more. You just need to endure more. You just need to just love God more and just know. All those things are true, but they're not helpful. What's helpful is to say, you've lost everything, but I'm still here for you, and God's still here for you. And if they respond, I just want God to kill me. Okay? This is where I'm getting serious. Okay? If a person ever talks to you in a way that Job does, do not ignore it. If a person is giving indications that they've contemplated their life is over, your job, absolutely necessary, Do not avoid this question. Look them in the eye and say, are you thinking about killing yourself? You have to be straight out. Because statistically speaking, before a person acts on those thoughts and those intentions, they've tried to communicate it 10 times. And if you're picking up on it, you may be one of those 10 times. And the thing that stops that from happening is a community. Is someone coming alongside and saying, I'm hearing this, and I want to ask, are you okay? The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, no, I'm not thinking that. And you can respond and say, hey, that's great. I just want you to know that I love you and I care for you. And if that does come to that point, you can call me whenever. You can get a hold of me whenever. Because we don't get do-overs with that. If you have someone who is speaking like Job, your responsibility is to ask them. And I want to avail myself that if you're like, I don't know what to do after that, come talk to me. I will try to help with pointers and tips, things that you can do, things that you can say, people who can help out with that. Because it's real, right? If Job was my friend and he said that, that's the question I'm asking. Okay. So again today, there are some serious things, I know. Really tough message on Christmas Sunday. But that's what the Lord wants me, okay? And within that, I just want to say, don't sit by and do nothing. Encourage, admonish, and help. Let's close in prayer. Lord, thank you for this chance to go through your word and to just be exposed to things that are maybe tough but real. Lord, we just want to pray for the rest of the service that we can find those moments of joy and that we'll hold on to them. Or be with the children as they come up and they sing their songs and do their skits. And be with the older people who can sing as well. And thank you that they can sing. Amen.